Up guys, first of all, thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate it. So people been making their mock drafts for the past couple of weeks. I personally like to make my mock draft once we have at least an example of what we're going to expect in this draft class. So after the combine, from now on I'm gonna try to make a mock draft once a week. So this is my first mock draft. And then next week, once the free agency opens up, I'm going to make a second mock draft video. As you guys can see from the title of this video, I have Kyler Murray going to the Raiders, and the reason for this is the Raiders are not going to stick with Derek Carr in the near future. They're moving to Vegas, so they're trying to build a team that is going to play for a new market, for a new city, and they want to bring excitement for that new city. Derek Carr, it's a good quarterback, but doesn't have the same explosiveness, the same talent as Murray. And John Gruden also said that he loves this kid. He thinks he's a 1 every 10-year type of talent. It would make sense for them to move up to grab Murray. Also, there are speculations that the Cardinals are trying to trade Rosen and they're going to draft Murray. In my opinion, it may be true that they're talking with Murray and they're talking with other teams simply because they're trying to taste the market. They're just trying to see what's going on with the market and if they can trade down and if they can gain some picks. Also, it may be possible that the Raiders can draft Murray, could draft Murray if they just stay at the 4th overall pick. But in that case, you also have to think that team like the Giants or team like the Jaguars, they can move up ahead of the Raiders to grab Murray. So just to be safe, in my opinion, the Raiders, they could make a trade with the Cardinals for the 1st overall pick. Also, I think in exchange for the 1st overall pick, the Cardinals will get the 4th overall pick, a 2nd round pick from this year, a later round pick from this year draft as well, probably like a 4th or 5th round pick, and one of those 2 first from next year draft, because the Raiders have 2 first round pick next year. I'm saying this because I think the Raiders, they want to keep all their 3 first round pick from this year draft. So that's how I'm going to make this mock draft. So I'm assuming that all of this is going to happen. With that being said, so I have Murray going 1st overall. The 49ers, they're going to stick with the 2nd overall pick and they're going to draft Nick Bosa. Then the Jets are going to draft, in my opinion, the best player from this draft class, a guy that can be the next Aaron Donald, and that's Quinnen Williams. Amazing talent. He impressed me so much at the combine. Really great pick for them. Now we got the Cardinals with the 4th overall pick. So they're not going to draft Nick Bosa, they're not going to draft Murray, but I think they're going to draft a top talent, someone that can help their defense out, and that's Josh Allen. I think they should be happy anyways with Josh Allen. Now we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They need help with their defense. They have a new coach, Bruce Arians. I don't think they're gonna sign any offensive weapon here, but I think they're gonna sign an amazing kid from LSU, and that's Devin White. The guy is super fast, definitely the best linebacker in this draft class. Now we got the Giants. Easy pick for me. They're going quarterback, even though they have major needs. They really need help in their defense. They need help in the offensive line, but I really don't know how many times it's going to happen that the Giants are going to be a top 10 pick in the near future. So this is the best time for them to draft their next franchise quarterback. And Haskins, could be the answer for them. And also, they really don't need to start the kid right now. They could go with Eli Manning next year, so Haskins can learn from Manning. Even though I think it will take some time for the Giants to become a playoff contender, even though they have the best upcoming running back in Barkley for the next decade. Now we got the Jaguars. I'm assuming here that the Jaguars are going to sign Nick Foles from the free agency. I just think it makes perfectly sense. I think it's a perfect fit for them. With that being said, I think the Jaguars overall, they have a complete team. They have a good running back. They have a bunch of good wide receiver that with a good quarterback can become a really good core overall. They have a good offensive line. I think they will go defense here. I mean, their major need offensive wise besides quarterback is also tight end, but I don't see a tight end going with the first 10 picks. I mean, it's not something that you usually see. I think they will go with the best player available, and I think they will go with Ed Oliver here, which makes sense in my opinion. Now let's move on to Detroit Lions. Detroit Lions, they need help with their defense. Offensive wise, they have Karen Johnson starting, running back, wide receiver, the last Golden Tate. I don't think they're gonna draft a wide receiver at the 8th overall. They're gonna fix their defense. Edge rush, I think Clelin Ferrell should go to them. Now we got the Buffalo Bills. I don't know. I'm just thinking wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. If you look at the roster, their defense is pretty much set. The few games they won last year, it was because of their defense. They need to either protect Josh Allen, so do something with the offensive line, or give Josh Allen a weapon. I think they will go with DK Metcalf just because the guy was so impressive in the combine. Even though I'm not totally sure about the con drills, I think he is not a complete talent. I really think that you need to develop the guy little by little, but he could be the next Calvin Johnson, hypothetically. And then we got number 10, Broncos. Broncos could be in the market for a quarterback as well. I don't think Joe Flacco or Keenum are going to be the future quarterback for the next couple years. So I think they could bring in a quarterback that could learn from those guys. But for the sake of this draft and for the sake of this mock draft, I think they're gonna address a major need on their defense, and that's the secondary. And I think they're gonna draft a cornerback. And the first cornerback I have on my draft board is Greedy Williams from LSU. Now we got Bengals. I'm thinking couple players. I mean, the Bengals, they need lots of help. The Bengals need offensive line help. They need edge rusher. They need linebacker help. Secondary help. They need help everywhere. I'm debating between offensive lineman here or edge or linebacker. I'm gonna go with offensive line. I think I'm gonna go with Jonah Williams from Alabama. Next, the Packers. I think they should address their defense here. Their major need on offense is tight end. But I don't think the Packers are going to draft a tight end with a 12 overall pick. I think they're gonna wait either for the end of the first round or for the second round to draft at the end. I think they're going to address their need on their defense. They need edge rusher. They need linebackers. I think they're going to draft an outstanding player from Michigan, defensive lineman Rashan Gary. This guy is a really great player. Now we got the Miami Dolphins. I personally think that in the hypothetical scenario where the Raiders draft Murray, Derek Carr could be on the market for a trade. I think a team that may trade for Derek Carr could be the Miami Dolphins. So let's assume in the sake of this draft that the Miami Dolphins, they address their quarterback in the offseason. I'm thinking could be Derek Carr or Teddy Bridgewater. So I don't think they're going quarterback here. They may go offensive line or edge. I have a couple names that can go at this position. The next best offensive lineman I have on my draft board is Jawan Taylor. He's from Florida, will make sense. But I don't know why I'm more kind to give them this freak, and that's Montez Sweat. This guy is 6'6", 6'6" foot tall, and only weighs 245. But he could be a real threat in the NFL. Now we got the Falcons. The Falcons, they need help at their defensive line, also the offensive linemen. I think they're gonna draft a good defensive lineman. I think here they really would like to get Montez Sweat, but I have the Dolphins jumping ahead of them and drafting that guy. I think they're gonna draft the next best available defensive lineman, and that's Christian Wilkins from Clemson. Now we got the Redskins. I think the Redskins are going to draft Drew Lock. I think they're gonna do so. I don't think they're gonna actually start Colt McCoy next year. I don't think they're gonna address a quarterback need in the offseason. I think they're gonna draft Drew Lock. They may start Colt McCoy the first few weeks, but the Drew Lock could be the starter eventually. Now we got the Panthers. I think the Panthers should be in the market for a replacement for Julius Pepper, or they need to find some help in their secondary. So in this mock draft, I have a bunch of defensive linemen and edge rusher gone before the Panthers are going to draft. But I have one guy that really impressed me and I think could be a stud in the NFL, and that's Jashai Polite from Florida. I think that would be a perfect fit for them. Okay, and then we got, if I'm correct, we got the Browns. The Browns could do many things here. They could give Baker Mayfield an extra weapon, but they could also beef up their defense more. I think they should help their secondary because they only have Denzel Ward there. So I think they should go safety or cornerback. Defensive line man makes sense as well. In my opinion though, you have a talent like DeAndre Baker available, you can pair to Denzel Ward, you'll be set for 10 years. I think they will just draft DeAndre Baker here. Vikings, easy pick, offensive lineman. We got Jawan Taylor going to the Vikings. Tennessee Titans, that's where the next wide receiver is going to be drafted. And I think there are a bunch of names that I like here. I think Marquis Brown will be interesting. That's because Marquis Brown, it's a speedy guy. And even though the Tennessee Titans, they have Twain Taylor, who's kind of fast, a guy that I really like for them, and I think is gonna rise in the draft board during draft day, is gonna be Akeem Butler. I have Akeem Butler going to the Tennessee Titans here. Steelers, I'm thinking linebacker, I'm thinking cornerback. Two options. So I'm gonna give them two possibilities. I'm gonna give them Devin Bush or the next best cornerback in my draft board is Byron Murphy. But I saw the secondary last year was terrible. I think there is enough talent. I think there are good talented linebacker in the second round as well. I think they're gonna draft their secondary. I think they're gonna draft Byron Murphy here. And now we got the Seahawks. Seahawks, they're unpredictable. They always draft guys that you don't know where they're coming from. Like last year, Penny was a major surprise. I think they should do something with their defense. I'm thinking defensive lineman, but also offensive line. It could be either way. Personally, here I have Cody Ford going for them, or also have Draymond Jones go for them. But since the Seattle Seahawks always surprise people and they're so unpredictable, I'm giving them a guy that I think should be a good fit for them, and that's Brian Burns from Florida State, edge rusher. The Ravens, I think wide receiver makes sense for them, but think about this. The Baltimore Ravens now, they're a run-heavy team. They just cut their two best wide receiver option in John Brown and Crabtree. I think they're just gonna rely on their defense, and I think they're just gonna run the ball, playing old style football. I have two wide receiver already taken from this draft board. I have DK Metcalf and Akeem Butler. I don't know why I want to give them Marquis Brown, but a name that also shows up in my mind is Draymond Jones from Ohio State. But I think wide receivers should make more sense. I'll give them Marquis Brown. If Lamar Jackson improves his accuracy, Marquis Brown, I think he can be a great deep threat. It would make perfect sense to draft a guy like Marquis Brown. Texans, I'll go offensive line for them, easy choice. I'll go with Cody Ford. Raiders, now the Raiders 24. I'll go with a guy that should up their defense. And the next best defensive line, you know what? I don't think I'm going defensive lineman. I mean, I was thinking linebacker. They kind of have linebacker, but they also need secondary help. So I'm undecided between Draymond Jones here and also Dexter Lawrence. I think the Raiders are going to draft Dexter Lawrence. It makes sense for them. Eagles, defensive lineman. Many people, they think that they should draft a defensive lineman, but I mean, they have Fletcher Cox. I don't think that's the biggest need. I think they should address their secondary. Their secondary last year was trash. Their secondary was trash. Darby is in free agency right now. Also, the offensive line, I think they still have a good offensive line. So I'm thinking here, cornerback, I'm thinking defensive line. You know what? I'm going to give them Josh Jacobs, just because I think they're gonna draft a running back at some point, and Josh Jacobs makes sense for them. That was a surprise, huh? You guys didn't expect me to pick Josh Jacobs to the Eagles. Well, I just think it makes sense because he's the best running back from this class. He could be as good as, I don't know, guys like Nick Chubb perhaps. And honestly, the Eagles like to use a running back committee, but if they can find a true 3 downs running back, I think Josh Jacobs makes sense. Also, it's important to point out that they may be going after Duke Johnson in a trade. If they do that, then I'm gonna definitely change my draft pick for them in the next mock draft. But as of now, I'm gonna give them Josh Jacobs. Colts, I wanna give the Colts an extra weapon for Andrew Luck. I think they're actually gonna pick up a wide receiver from free agency. I think they're gonna go after Tyrell Williams. So here they could go secondary help cornerback or perhaps defensive lineman. I still have Draymond Jones available because I gave the Raiders Dexter Lawrence. There are different wide receivers that I like for them. I have Akeem Butler, I have Marquis Brown, and I have DK Metcalf already gone. I think I'm gonna give the Colts one more wide receiver who could be the best wide receiver from this class, and that's from wide receiver from Arizona State, Neil Ari. Now we got the Raiders. I think the Raiders gonna draft the first end from this draft class, TJ Okerson, and they're gonna replace Jerry Cook doing this. And I think that's a big upgrade for their offense, considering that I think the Raiders are going to make a move, or they're going to try to sign Antonio Brown or even Odell Beckham with a trade. That's just because I think the Raiders, they want to bring excitement for Vegas, so they wanted to pair Murray with the top weapon, so Brown will make sense, and plus you give them Noah Font will make perfect sense. And also I think they're gonna sign a running back from free agency. I think they're gonna go after Mark Ingram, but we'll see. I'll probably make a different video I'll probably make a different video about free agency. Now we got the Chargers. Many people give the Chargers a defensive tackle and interior lineman like Dexter Lawrence. I think they're gonna draft more than one defensive lineman here, but I think this draft is loaded with. Defensive linemen. And in my opinion, since I only have picked one linebacker so far, which is Devin White, I'm gonna give the Chargers Devin Bush, Michigan linebacker. Second best linebacker in this draft class will be a major upgrade for the Chargers at that position. I wasn't decided between the Chargers or the Steelers for Devin Bush in this draft. I think the Steelers should go first with a cornerback. It will make perfect sense. Chiefs, I think the Chiefs will draft someone that can help their secondary, and I think they're gonna draft. It could be a defensive lineman. It could be a defensive back. Also, defensive linemen should make sense since they're letting Houston go and they're letting. And they're probably trying to trade D Ford to someone else. There are different options here. In my opinion, they're gonna draft a guy that it could be a steal at this pick, and that's Jeffrey Simpson from Mississippi State. I think that's a major steal. I think the Chargers could also draft Simmons with the 28th overall pick, but I think Devin Bush, since he's the second best linebacker and nobody drafted yet in this mock draft, I think the Chargers will go with Devin Bush first. Now we got the now we got the Packers. So I give the Packers an edge rusher. They could go with Andy or linebacker. I'm giving them two options. I'm giving them Mac Wilson or Noah Fant. I don't know why. I think the Packers, they should beef up their defense and then try to add a tight end in the second round or third round. That's just because the Packers don't really use the end that much. I think that they're gonna draft a guy to replace Clay Matthews, and that's Mac Wilson. Rams, the Rams are going to draft a safety to replace LaMarcus Joyner, and that's gonna be Deontay Thompson, which in my opinion it's a great pick for them at this draft pick, 31st overall. That's a for me that could be a steal. That could be a steal already, because he's the 24th overall player in my draft board. He's from Alabama, and getting Deontay Thompson at the 31st, it will make perfect sense for them, and I think it's a perfect fit, and it could be a steal. Now we got the Super Bowl winner Patriots. That's interesting. The Patriots, like the Seattle Seahawks, though it's always tough to predict what they're going to do, because they also bring people that no one expects them to draft, or sometimes they just trade away their pick. So we got Trent Brown probably trying to testing the free agency. We also have Flowers also testing free agency, probably. They could also find the replacement for Gronkowski. I only have one end at this point being drafted, and that's Okerson for the Raiders. I think Noah Fant for the Patriots will make sense, but I also like a wide receiver for them here, and that will be AJ Brown for them. So those two guys, I will give Noah Fant for them for this video.